Hello, welcome to North Shore Bible Study Goes video. We are doing this because of the snow day, and so I'm just going to record my talk at home and you can watch it at your home and it should be great. We're going super high tech today, let me tell you. So we have this amazing, I'm going to be able to zoom in, check this out. Woo! See? Zoom. Oh no, right? We also have different camera angles. See? Look at that. Side view, profile. I know, right? And we have the most amazing PowerPoint display for you. I know. Check this out. Hey, I'm doing the best I can, okay? So we're just going to go with flow. So what I would say, grab a cup of tea or coffee or whatever is your drink of choice at the moment. Cozy up. This might take a little longer than 30 minutes because of all the manual kind of PowerPointy stuff I have to do. And so we're just gonna let it be what it is. Okay, some of you don't even know who I am because you're brand new to Bible study. Welcome. Super glad you're here. My name is Carolyn Ritzesender, and I am the coordinator for Morning Bible Study. I'm also one of the teachers. We have 4 teachers, and so I'm one of those 4. You'll get to meet the other 3 in the following weeks. They are wonderful ladies. And I don't know, let me tell you a little bit about myself, especially if you're brand new. I have a picture of my family. Let's see if you'll be able to see it. It's right here. Can you tell anything on that? This is my husband, Brad. This teeny little person, that's me. This is my 2 boys, Tim and Jeff, our daughter, Katie. Katie is a senior in the University of Washington. She graduates in June. I can't believe it. And this is my smooch pooch, Riley. Is a sweetie baby. Some of you have noticed that my hair is curly. Okay, so I've been growing it out. This is my natural curl. So I'm giving it a shot. Jury's out. We'll see. So anyway, that's why I look different. And, so that's that. Now, I am wondering if any of you got a chance over break to read a really good story. I love stories. I read a bunch of books over break. I watched fun movies, loved it. So I thought I would share with you some of my favorite books or stories that you can kind of get to know me. So because we just finished Christmas, I'm going to share some of those. This is A Christmas Carol. Love this. It's my favorite. And I listen to this story every year. It's the best. Okay. I don't know if any of you are brave enough to admit that you like The Grinch That Stole Christmas. Yes, I love this. I have the whole thing memorized. I think it's hilarious. My daughter and I quote this year-round. Hilariously lovely. Okay. And then just for a little more serious side, I have these 2 books. They're my fave. The Language of Flowers, so good. The School of Essential Ingredients. Both of these are yummy and sweet, and they warm my heart. I love them. Best Disney movie ever, Emperor's New Groove. Healthy family, mom and dad, kids that like each other, and the commitment and love of one man changes the life of another. Best. And it has Yzma, the most hilarious evil person in the world. Adore her. Okay. I actually, for my PowerPoint, I had pictures of all these different books I liked. So I have this one. Are you watching The Mandalorian? Baby Yoda. It's so cute. Every time he comes on the screen, I'm like, it's so cute. He cracks me up. Oh, and I have Jack Ryan on there because, yeah. So, of course, though, best love story ever is the Bible. Got to give a shout out for the greatest love story ever told. So we are going to dive into this today, and it's going to be fun. Our study is called The Faithful Heroes of the Old Testament, and it's got 5 authors. So these 5 ladies have actually written a whole study on each of these people that we're going to study. And this is a compilation of those. So they've taken a lesson out of each of those studies and put them in this one. So that's why we have 5 authors. So the heroes we're going to be studying are Gideon and Nehemiah, and then Esther, and then Hosea and Malachi. So we're not going to get to know those heroes in depth. That's not the point of this study. The point of this study is to look at God's faithfulness. How is God faithful in the lives, in this snapshot of the lives of these heroes? So that's kind of the goal. Okay, so let me get myself situated here. You should have a Bible timeline, and it looks like this. So I sent that. It should have been attached, and I hope you printed it out. You're going to need it for both timelines that we sent with you. You're going to want for this teaching. So you can pause and print that out if you need to. Some of you are brand new to this, and you don't know this story at all, and you might be a little intimidated thinking everybody knows this and you're the only one who doesn't. Okay, not everybody knows all of this. I don't know all of this. So don't let your insecurity of not knowing this or being new to this stop you from asking really great questions. Some of you have been in Bible study for years and years, and you're embarrassed because you feel like you should know this better than you do. And I just want to say to everybody, Bible study is a place where we don't pretend and we don't pose or try to look more spiritual than we are. We all are where we are, and we're all in process, and we're all learning. So it's okay to say, I don't know this. This is new to me. Ask questions, and we can be really honest in that. All of us are in Bible study to learn. We're in Bible study to draw closer to Jesus, to become more like him. Right? We're looking for life change. That happens when we're vulnerable and honest with wherever we are. So extend yourself some grace, be brave, and ask your questions. Okay. All right. So this great book is a lovely book. It's not written in order. If you were to pick this up and read it front to back, you would be hopping all over in the timeline. So this that I have given you, this is in order. Okay. You're going to see that there are images. These represent different time periods in the timeline of the Bible. There is a title under each one that represents that time period, and then influential people who were during that time period. And then at the bottom, you'll see there's 2 links to videos on the Bible Project. One's on the Old Testament, one's on the New Testament. I think they're like, one's 12 minutes, one's 8 minutes. They're really great. So if you're new to this, or you want a refresher, or you just enjoy hearing the story of the Bible, it's really cool how they do it. So I highly encourage you to go to those and watch those sometime. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to read you a story, since today is Story Day. And you can take notes if you want to. You can grab your coffee and cozy up and listen and hear for the faithfulness of God in this story. Okay, so here's my kind of cleaned up timeline. And we're going to read a story. Ready? In the beginning, the all-powerful, personal God created the universe. This world was made for human flourishing, where we could live in joy in the presence of our Maker, worshiping God by loving him and one another forever. But God knew that the first woman and man would rebel against him, resulting in eternal separation from him. So before God even created mankind, he planned his rescue mission. As he was creating the thorns that would one day be placed on his head, as he was creating the tree he would one day die on, as he was creating the cave that his body would be buried in, his heart cry was, "Beloved, I am coming for you." His rescue plan started when he chose the nation Israel to reveal himself to the world. He made a covenant promise with a man named Abraham, and he told him, "I'll make you the father of a great nation. I will always be your God, and you will always be my people." But as time went on, the Israelites stopped trusting God. Right here. They worshipped idols, and in their rebellion, the Israelites faced great struggles and ended up a defeated nation of slaves in Egypt. But their disobedience didn't cause God to break his promise. He remained faithful. He sent Moses to lead them out of captivity in Egypt, and he sent Joshua to lead them into the promised land. However, time and time again, the Israelites, they lost sight of their God and they lapsed into idolatry and sin. In faithfulness, God called judges and kings and prophets to lead them back to him. But their continued disobedience led the Israelites into exile. Even after their return to Jerusalem, they were still under rule of other empires. Some prophets foresaw the coming of a Messiah, a king who would usher in a golden era of peace and prosperity. And more than any nation, the Israelites looked to the future, to the coming of the Messiah, and to the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham to make his descendants a great nation. And then after that, there was 400 years of silence where God didn't speak through or to his people. But this silence didn't mean that God still wasn't faithful. In the fullness of time, Jesus Christ, God himself, came to renew the world and to restore his people. Jesus is the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies of the Messiah, our Savior. And Jesus was not the type of Messiah the Jews had expected, and many rejected Jesus and his teachings. And this conflict ultimately led to Jesus' execution by crucifixion. Though perfect and innocent, he suffered the consequences of humans' rebellion, but 3 days later, God raised him from the dead, conquering death and making it possible for all people to know him personally. Then the Holy Spirit came to live inside every believer, and the church was formed, the body of Christ. Paul, a believer or a follower of Jesus, was called by God to share the gospel or good news with all people. And then God promised to renew the whole world, to return for his people, and to take them home with him where they could flourish and enjoy his presence with him and with one another forever. So God's rescue mission, here and here, his faithfulness, his faithful plan to keep his promise, despite human sin and rebellion, reached its climax in Jesus' death and burial and resurrection. From the beginning of time, God set into motion a plan to draw his beloved back to himself, to draw you back to him forever. So that is the tenacious love story of God, a God who keeps his promises, a God who is trustworthy and faithful, a God who is worthy of our praise and adoration. He is wonderful, and oh, do we love him. Okay, so that's the big, big picture story. So with that frame of mind, and in that context of God's faithfulness, let's look at how our 5 heroes fit into that story. Okay, so just so you can see, the time period that we're looking at for our 5 heroes is this. It's the judges, the kingdoms, the exile, and the return. Now what I've done is I've taken these 4 time periods, and I've blown them up into a bigger timeline, and you should have a copy of it, right? It looks like this, so you should have that out. you can see at the bottom, these are other books of the Bible that were written during these time periods. But the first thing I want to show you is, where is it here? Where those divisions go. So Judges, that happens, you can draw a line between Deborah and David. That's the time of the Judges. And our second time period was the kingdoms, and that ends after Jonah and Jeremiah. So you can draw that line, Jonah and Jeremiah. And then the exile ends after Daniel and before the return. So after Daniel. And then the return is the last section. Okay, so then I want to show you our 5 heroes, where they are. I'm going to show you right here. So this is Gideon, right? This is Hosea. Then we have Esther and Malachi and Nehemiah. So you can see where our heroes fit into this. We have 1 in the Judges, 1 in the time of the kingdoms, and 3 that are during the return. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to dive into these 4 time periods. Okay, so I'm going to put this here, and then we're going to pull this one out. Okay, so many papers. What I've done is I've taken the front half, so the Judges and the, is it here? Yeah. The Judges and the Kingdoms, these 2, I've taken this part of the timeline and I've blown it up big. So you should see Gideon and you should see Hosea. So those are the front half of the timeline. Okay. So I want to put, this is the time of the Judges here. I want to put the Judges into context. So the Israelites had escaped out of Egypt. They'd wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. They'd entered into the promised land and they conquered it. And the territories were divided and given up to each tribe. So this is before there was any kings or kingdoms or anything. And it was the time of the Judges. So when you hear judge, we have a definite understanding of what that means. But in biblical times, it meant something different. These judges were messengers sent by God to deliver the Israelites from their oppressors. So they led in war, they brought justice to the people, they acted as a type of government. During this time period, there were 15 judges, and Gideon was the 5th, and he reigned for 40 years. Other judges during this time period were Deborah, Abimelech, Samson, or Samuel. The Israelites during this time grew progressively more evil. They followed their own desires. It says in Judges 21:25, in those days there was no king in Israel. We know that. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. It was a very evil time, and it got progressively more evil as it went on. Okay, eventually, the Israelites, they wanted a king. So they're getting here closer to the time of Saul and David and Solomon. And Samuel, who was a judge at that time, said that they were sinning asking for a king. But they insisted. They wanted a king to fight their battles. They wanted a king to give them a symbol of national unity. They wanted to look like the nations around them. So they demanded a king. And the first 3 kings were Saul and David, and then David's son Solomon. And these 3 men, they governed the United Kingdom. Now, just to be clear, they didn't like transport to Britain. Okay, that's a different United Kingdom. But when we're talking about this time period with David and Solomon being king, we're talking about the United Kingdom. Okay, so I'm going to show you a picture of the United Kingdom. This is it. So Jerusalem is here. And so this is kind of the territory that David and Solomon would have ruled. Okay. So typically a king during this time, but Israel's, this king would hold supreme authority. But in Israel, a king was a covenantal king, which meant that he wasn't autonomous. He was always obligated to submit to the authority of God and the word of the prophets. So The fourth king was Rehoboam, and Rehoboam was Solomon's son. And there was a conflict between the people. Solomon had taxed the people highly. They came to Rehoboam and said, "This is such a heavy burden. Can we lift it?" Rehoboam said no. And so Rehoboam, who was down in Jerusalem, sent his IRS tax collector up north to collect the taxes, and the people said no, and they killed the poor guy. Bad day, right? So this conflict resulted in a divided kingdom. So this is what happened as a result of that. So here's a map of the divided kingdom. So from this point on in history, the southern kingdom down here is known as Judah, and its capital is Jerusalem, and one of David's descendants would always be king. Prophets in this southern kingdom would be Isaiah and Jeremiah. You can see those on your timeline. The northern kingdom up here, this was composed of the 10 tribes. This was Judah and Benjamin down here. The rest of the tribes were up here. They were known as Israel. So this is the country, Israel and Judah. The prophets in the north included Hosea and Jonah. The northern kingdom would consistently have evil kings. They would consistently behave wickedly. They never submitted or followed God. They would be the first to be scattered in judgment. The southern kingdom would have some good kings, lots of bad kings, and eventually Judah would also be taken into captivity. Okay, so those are the divided kingdoms. So you'll see that on here. We get to Solomon. When Rehoboam comes, this represents the northern kingdom. This is the southern kingdom. So this is where actually Jeroboam was the king, and this is where Rehoboam was king. So we now have a divided kingdom. So we're talking 2 timelines. So on this timeline where you see the split, this is the north and this is the south. Okay, so now what we're ready to do is talk about the second half of our timeline. So we're on here, right? So we've done these 2. Now what we're going to do are these 2, looking at the exile and the return. So I've taken that part, the second half, and I've blown it up big. So you can see the Assyrian captivity here, right? 3 returns. So can you find yourself on your timeline? Okay, so we have the 2 separate kingdoms, and God had long warned Israel of a coming judgment many, many times. 2 Kings 17:13 says, "Yet the Lord warned Israel and Judah by every prophet and every seer, saying, Turn from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes, in accordance with all the law that I command your fathers, that I sent to you by my servants the prophets." So he's warning them, turn, and keep my commandments. You need to do this. Many people, many prophets told the Israelites this, but they didn't do it. They broke the law. They worshipped other gods. They burned their children as offerings. They used divination as part of their godless worship and lifestyle. Many attempts were made to turn the people back to God, but they refused. They refused to repent. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the 3 invasions that happened on the second half of our timeline. The first one is here, and that's the Assyrian invasion, and that's going to be the northern kingdom. And then 2 happened down in the south. We've got the Babylonian and the Persian captivities, invasions and captivities. So we're going to be looking at those 3. The very first one was the Assyrian invasion. And so we're talking about this one up here. King Pul of Assyria, he invaded the northern kingdom, and he took those people into exile. In fact, they found an image of King Pul. I'll show it to you. Just kidding. Couldn't resist. Okay, that is not King Pul. Okay, so what happens is, this is pretty cool. Let me get my map. All right, so here we are. The Assyrians come from here. They're like whoosh into the northern part of Israel, and they take the Israelites and move them back east. There were a few people left, but what happened is the Assyrians then took a whole group of different foreigners from different nations and brought them back into Israel. And the foreigners and the Israel remnants, they intermarried because Israel wasn't doing anything about following God. So they intermarried. Samaria became its capital, and actually that people group became known as the Samaritans. So during the time of Christ, if you know the story of the Good Samaritan or the Samaritan woman at the well, it comes from this time period where the Assyrians came in and different nations, foreigners married. That group became known as the Samaritans. And to the Jews later during Christ's time, that's why they were unclean, because they had intermarried and because they had refused temple worship. So that's the Assyrian nation, and that was up north. Okay, the second invasion is the Babylonian invasion. So now we're in the southern kingdoms. We're down south, and we're talking about this one. This is where the Babylonians came in. They took over the Assyrians. They actually came into Judah. They destroyed Judah. They destroyed the capital of Jerusalem. They destroyed the temple, and they forcefully relocated everybody back to Babylon. Only the remnants, there was like the weakest, poorest, the least threatening, were left behind. I have another map here. It's a little busy, but I hope you can see. This is Jerusalem. This is Babylon. So they went in, they took the people. Most of the Church of God was brought, the Jews were brought here. Jeremiah, a prophet during that time, had promised that the Lord would be with the exiles, and he gave them instructions to settle down there, to serve the Babylonians well until they could be restored to Jerusalem. And generally, they enjoyed a great deal of freedom. Daniel was one of those exiled Israelites. So he lived on the east in Babylon. And these exiles, they were forced to learn the Aramaic language. So when we have Old Testament scriptures that have been translated into Aramaic, it was because of this time, because they were taken to Babylon and then learned that language. Okay, I need to not just pick this up. I need to drink this. Do you need a drink? Do you need a break? You doing okay? A brain overload? Hang in there. We're getting there. Okay, so then we have, let's do this one. Okay, so this is the southern kingdom. Now we have the Persian captivity, and the Persians take over. So all of the Babylonian Empire was here, and then the Persians came. They took over everything. They had the big, huge land that they took over. So they conquered the Babylonian Empire. And then under Cyrus the Great, this empire represented like the world's first global superpower. And it was based on a model of tolerance and respect for other cultures and religions. So that brings us to the last period here, the returns. So King Cyrus, who was Persian king, he allowed the Israelites who had been deported to Babylon to return to Jerusalem. So he allowed them all, and they came back in 3 waves. And that's why you see 3 returns on your timeline. So Esther here, Esther was in Susa, which is east of the city of Babylon, and she was an Israelite, so she was a Jew, and she became the wife of the Persian king Xerxes. So she lived in exile the whole time. She never was in Jerusalem. But she had a huge impact on how the Jews were saved as a nation. We're going to study about her. Malachi we're going to study. He was a prophet. He returned in this second return to Jerusalem, and he spoke of the sins of the Jews, and he was instrumental in helping them find the law, the truth, how to be a nation again. And then we're also going to study Nehemiah. He came back in the third return. He was a cupbearer to the king Artaxerxes in Persia, and he asked of his own request, can I go back as governor? He was made governor of Jerusalem, and he wanted to help build the wall in Jerusalem. So the Israelites, the lower kingdom, was taken over to here. They remained their Jewish identity and then eventually returned. Okay, so that's what that is. So what I want to do now is just kind of, sorry, my voice. I just want to go back and put this back into context. So we have our 4 time periods, right? Do you remember where they fit? Right here. So we have these 4. I hope when you see judges, kingdoms, exile, and return, that now those 4 things mean a lot more to you than when we started. Okay, so now we're going to look at Gideon. Oh my goodness. So whole Bible, God's faithfulness. We brought it down to judges, kingdoms, exile, and return. And now we're going to Gideon, who's in the judges' time. So he is right here. So we're going to look at Gideon. He's the hero that we studied this week. All right. Judges 6 is where Gideon starts. Now, remember, this is before the kingdoms, right? This is right after they got in the promised land. They've been settled. And God is using judges to help lead them. And Judges 6:1 says, the people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of the Midian 7 years. So they were being harassed by the Midianites for years and years and years. And in the time of Judges, the evil that they did, the disobedience that they did, this was a result of that. So the Israelites, they worshiped Baal during that time. They worshiped Asherah. The chapter goes on to explain how the Israelites were overpowered and plundered by the Midianites. In verse 6, it says, and Israel was brought very low because of Midian, and the people of Israel cried out to God for help. God faithfully answered Israel's cry despite their unfaithfulness and idolatry. God appears to Gideon, and he tells him that he is a mighty warrior, even though he's terrified, and that Gideon will save Israel from the hands of the Midianites. Which is interesting because when God appears to Gideon, he's hiding in a wine press, threshing his wheat. It's like a little hole in the ground, and he is hiding in there doing that. Normally he would be out in the open, but he didn't want the Midianites to come and steal his wheat. So he is hiding in fear as God appears to him. And Gideon is really doubtful about God's faithfulness. He says in verse 13, please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why then has all this happened to us? And where are all his wonderful deeds that our father recounted to us, saying, did not the Lord bring us from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and given us into the hand of Midian. So you hear that hopelessness, and you hear that the doubt. Is God faithful? Is he still here? So as I was thinking about the story of Gideon, I was wondering, and I'm wondering for you, have you ever been in a circumstance where you cried out to God and he seemed absent, and you wondered if he cared and if he was there? And if God's ultimate purpose is to draw people to himself, why are there such long spans of silence? Why was it 7 years? Why not 3? Why not 15? The Israelites never behaved never turned toward God or started behaving in obedience. So it wasn't about their behavior that he came back. But was God still working during that time period? Is he faithful? Is he faithful now? Can we trust him if we can't see him working? I had, I don't know, it was about 6 years ago. And I cried out to God. I was really tired of feeling insecure in certain relationships, lack of confidence. I wanted more confidence. I wanted my identity to be in him. I was kind of at a no more point where my insecurity and lack of confidence was impacting relationships and ministry in a way that I was getting really frustrated with. It's like, enough of this. this has to stop. And so I started praying and asking God, take away this insecurity, root and establish my identity in you, and give me confidence in you so that I can be freed up to love other people and not be so worried about myself. I was highly motivated. I got a book on insecurity and confidence. I read that. I got a plaque up in my closet. She is clothed in dignity and strength from Proverbs 31. I memorized verses. I was ready. I was ready for God's answer. Let's do it now. Or so I thought. So after a year of praying that and no answer came, I kind of moved into a long-term prayer position. I stopped doing things on my own effort and just started waiting on the Lord. And I prayed weekly, every week, for years and years, that God would build my confidence and root and establish my identity in Him. And to me, those years, they felt like crickets, silence, like nothing was happening. And my prayers, after 3 or 4 or 5 years, became all rote. And I was no longer eagerly anticipating God's answer. I believed He could, but it just had become a routine for me to ask. But then about a year and a half ago, some things that weren't very fun, that I didn't really like, propelled me into a season of healing and growth. And I am in the middle of that season right now. God is answering my prayers in ways that is amazing to me. But the thing that I find most stunning are the people that I've met, that I'm doing life with, the events that I have in the last couple of years attended, the books that I've read, the classes that I've taken a couple recovery classes, the groups that I'm in that I wasn't in 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, the circumstances that I've experienced that I hadn't experienced 6 years ago. He has put in my life so many things that have lined up, that have allowed for this season of growth to even be possible. It's mind-blowing to me. Every day I'll read something in a book, and then the next day it happens and I get to practice it. And then I mess up and I get nervous. And then that night it's either like a counselor or a friend or a book or something has the exact answer that I need. And so I'm at the point right now where I'm like, Lord, just show me the next step. Oh my goodness. It's like every day things are dropping from my head to my heart. And it would not be possible for God to do what He's doing in my life right now without having lined up the groups that I'm in and the knowledge and experience and just the opportunity in ministry and people that I have to practice what I'm learning. I couldn't have done 6 years ago. I couldn't have. He's amazingly faithful. My confidence in Him, He's had all of eternity to line this up. And He cares about me that much, that He would take that much time to do that. His love for me, I find myself at awe. I shouldn't be, but I am. He has been faithfully answering my prayer for years. I just couldn't see it, but He's been doing it. So God is always working. From creation, He has had all of eternity to answer the prayer you haven't even asked yet. And He is working out His purposes for you and for the world. Maybe one step you can take this week is to, like Gideon, meet God in the winepress, wherever your place of fear is or doubt, to have an honest conversation with Him and say, are you there? Is our God faithful? Have you forsaken me? Do you remember? And have those honest conversations with Him. I would just say to you that doubt is okay. If you doubt, it doesn't mean you don't believe. And you can take those to God and share them honestly with Him. God came to save the Israelites through Gideon, not because they were faithful, but because He is faithful. So whatever you're crying out to God for, and I know some of you have heavy, heavy things on your heart, He hears and He cares, and He is working out His purpose for you. He is working it out, even if you can't see it. He is faithful. So this is the beautiful story of God, one where at the very beginning, when God created the world, His heart cry was, darling, I'm coming for you. He is your hero. Let's pray. Lord, I just pray for every woman who is listening to this, that you would meet her where she's at and reveal yourself to her in a way that she sees that you care, that you hear, that you have a plan, that you are leading her, that even if she can't see it, you are putting things in her life to answer her heart cry. So I thank you for your faithfulness. We can count on you. I am learning more and more every day that I can count on you. You are a God who is working throughout all time to draw people to yourself. You are a hero, and we love you. So bless these ladies today. We look forward to being together soon. And I ask this in the magnificent name of Jesus. Amen. All right, everybody, stay warm. I hope to see you next Tuesday, and I love you very much. Take care.